When my mother was in her 40s, she started to make friends with people I'm going to call child abuse victims, not survivors. And these are the types of people that were in her corner when she died. They consequently betrayed my mother, tried to hurt me, and endangered her baby, Alexandria. And when I learned this lesson, this very powerful lesson, I promised myself that I would not die with those type of friends, so-called friends, on my team. I know the difference between a victim and a survivor. I may not be able to point one versus the other out in a crowd, but give me some time to assess them, and I believe I know the difference between a victim and a survivor. These people I bring up are in Green versus Bell, third-party custody, and they show up early on. I'm going to give first names of this individual. Her name is Jeannie. This was one of my mother's very good friends at the time of her death. Jeannie and I were not close. We did not have a rapport at all. I don't think I said 5-6 words to her. I believe my mother met her actually in Y2K, so she met her towards the end of her life. And I was in Long Beach, and by the time I met her, I wasn't impressed, and she probably wasn't impressed with me. She was a white gal, or is a white gal, blonde, blue-eyed. A lot of people would find her attractive, or found her attractive, and she did marry well. My mother told me that Jeannie's father used to have sex with Jeannie and all of her sisters, and her mother knew about it and didn't do anything. This is what my mother told me about Jeannie. Jeannie never told me this. So this would be considered hearsay, and I don't think it will make my book. I am comfortable bringing it up now because it's relevant. And Jeannie can also say that my mother told her some things or something about me, Sholanda, behind my back. I have no idea what my mother told Jeannie about me behind my back, but we would take it to the evidence room and see if there was any truth to it. Now, to have people confirm if Jeannie was raped by her father on a regular basis may be hard to do. So I'm comfortable telling you what my mother told me. I won't press the issue. My mother married Pedro Bell a couple of weeks after meeting him, and she met him when she was on the rebound of a relationship she had ended or was ended by a married man she was having an affair with for years. I don't think the married man is in Green versus Bell, but I do want to give you information in regards to how my mother met Pedro and what type of emotional and mental state she was in. She was on the rebound, okay, devastated that her adulterous affair had ended, and met Pedro in a bar and married him a couple of weeks later. Doesn't sound very complimentary to my mother, but those were the matter of facts, and if you knew her, you knew that that's exactly what happened. You can't lie about those type of facts. My mother told me that Pedro told her that he was a New York City foster care kid, and he was abused, and at least one foster parent or set of parents or foster home, somebody in that house dressed him up like a girl, put a dress on him, and sodomized him. Now, Pedro didn't tell me that someone put a dress on him and sodomized him, but he did tell me he was a foster care kid in New York, and told me that he lost contact with his sister when they went to different foster homes. And it's ironic that a man who does not know his parents and hasn't seen his sister since they were split up in foster care would have indifference and a passion to keep his daughter, who does not have a biological mother or any siblings, away from me. It's ironic. But we'll talk about the intergenerational abuse and psychology that goes from victim to victim, given an opportunity to abuse. I'm going to throw in by default my Uncle Bell. He is Doshia Scott's son. Doshia Scott is my grandmother. We called her Medea. And I'll talk to you about what I know and heard about Medea in another segment, and it will not be included with the synopsis. It wouldn't fit there. It'll probably go under something I'm tentatively planning to call The Last Time I Talked to a Scot, which is going to detail the last relationships I had with family members on that side, and that includes the last time I spoke to Yolanda Dyson and the last time I spoke to her mother, Mary Dyson. They died a couple years apart, 2014, 2016, respectively. So anyway, I'm going to include Burl Clinton, Uncle Bell, as a child abuse victim, not survivor, by default. And maybe I can tell you what happened to him when he was a kid, but considering so many Scots have been abused, then, he probably was too. Or it was something he grew up with and had to deal with early on in life. So these three characters that are represented in Green versus Bell betrayed my mother, disrespected my mother, turned against my mother, lied about my mother, lied about me, and like I said, just jeopardized the safety of her children, their best friends' children, their ex-wife's children, their sister's children. Now, if you need a reminder, I'm going to ask you the question: would a woman who is Mossy Green's very good friend, not a friend of Pedro, say something bad about Mossy's daughter and side with Pedro unless that was a betrayal? Guess you'll have to read the case. That was kind of hard to follow along with. Do you think my mother expected her brother to side with Pedro and not his niece? Okay, those are the questions. Do you think my mother thought her very good friend would side with her ex-husband over her daughter? Question mark. No, of course not. And it was a betrayal done to a deceased woman. And these three people motivated me to ask God, quote unquote, in 2006 if I should kill them. That's how much anger I had towards them. And the good news or the bad news is that it was a variety of characters. These three, the big three. I couldn't just go after Jeannie, the white, and I referred to her as the white C word all day long. Couldn't just go after her, so it wasn't going to be a white issue. couldn't just go after my uncle. So it couldn't be a Vietnam flashback from being molested issue. And I couldn't just go against Pedro Bell, the man that assaulted me, kidnapped my sister, and is abusing my sister, I'm assuming, abusing my sister. I couldn't just pick one of them. It was going to be all three. And I had to ask, quote unquote, God, is this what I should do? Because I'm out of solutions dealing with these betrayers and these antagonists. Now, this was in 2006, and my sister had been gone for a year. Green versus Bell is over when I asked about if I should kill these people. They had been antagonists since 2003. Pedro prior to that, but they pop off 2003. I'm asking if I should kill them in 2006. The answer was no and yes. When I ask God questions, I get answers. Don't find that hard to believe. That's why I ask him the big questions, to get the big answers. He said, no, you're not a murderer. And as a matter of fact, I wrote a song about that. I'll talk to you about my music during these years in another video. Another upload. Probably not going under Green versus Bell. We'll see. And today, I have to tell everybody, I don't have that type of anger towards these three individuals anymore. And that's part of my testimony. Now, the Jeannie character, I stopped thinking about her a while ago. I wish I could tell you the year. She just faded out of my peripheral. I just stopped thinking about her. As if she has died and has been buried underground for years, and there's no telepathy between us. Or maybe she got on her knees and prayed for me to forgive her. I mean, the reason that I have no feelings towards her, it's almost as if it was something done on her end to have me change my mind about her. Do not have any feelings towards this woman. No need for her to make the book except to express my point that when you are talking to people about something really tragic that happened to you as a child, and they say me too, that's not necessarily a good, healthy relationship. There's a difference between finding somebody you have abuse in common with and finding another survivor to sustain your healing and recovering process. These were victims. My Uncle Bell, I don't hate my Uncle Bell. My Uncle Bell, I would consider him a piece of beep. Okay, a piece of fill in the blank, starts with an S. I honestly just feel that's what he is. But if there's any consolation, I don't look at him much differently than I look at any of the Scots. They're a group of not quite intelligent enough to be sociopaths, and I'm not complimenting sociopaths because they're known to have low IQs on paper, but they just don't really have what it takes to be sociopaths, and they're pedophile sympathizers, and he is not the only person in that family that manifests that degenerate, low life, low class character that's always been acceptable and revered. Medea used to tell her children that if they turned into snakes, she would still love them. Now, this is something my mother told me probably 24 times in my life, starting when I was very young. So I'm going to say Mom was the horse firsthand, and I believe her. And I believe Medea did tell her kids that even if they turned into snakes, she would still love them, because a lot of them turned into snakes. So Uncle Bell fits in a category with other Scots. So there's no real antagonism. Animus, is that the word, towards him, because he's like a few of the other ones. Pieces of you know what. But I don't hate him. Pedro Bell. Like I mentioned earlier, that I had to pray for this man in order to eliminate the hatred I had in my heart for him. I hated him so much that I didn't, it sounds like a joke, but I was a little bit serious. I hated him so much that I could rip his heart out, eat it live on pay-per-view. This was prior to Facebook Live. Now the joke would be rip his heart out and eat it live on Facebook. But back then I wanted to do it on pay-per-view and see if I can generate some money. That's the type of hatred I had towards him. I don't have that hatred towards him now. Absolutely, positively not. Pedro Bell is the last enemy I've had, and the last human being I've hated, and the last enemy I would think that I would ever want to have, and the last person I plan to hate. Do not hate him again. I do not hate him anymore. So, the moral of the story is, as I pondered being an Andrew, as a Cunanan, the gentleman that went from the West Coast all the way to Florida to murder people, and I realized, not a good idea. What's not going to work out for you? When I pondered that based upon hating these three people so much, I can tell you today, I don't feel the same way about them as I used to. And I would tell anybody who is dealing with betrayal and has a name and a face to go with the accusation of child abuse or domestic violence, that time does heal all wounds, and you have to get over some events, and if you're willing to get over some events will get over you. It's not a coincidence, but unfortunate that while I couldn't care less about Pedro Bell and say good riddance, I'm glad he's not in my life. I'm glad I don't have to be bothered with him. I'm glad he doesn't have access to me. I'm glad I'll never see him again. He may be directly connected to my sister, who is missing in action, who I actually care about very much. I want the best for Alexandria. I'm not obsessed with her life. I'm obsessed with her being as healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually as she can, because I don't want to see any child abuse victims. I want her to be a survivor.